Everyone, this is update for October 26, 2023, day 610 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for October 25. So I'm gonna start with strategic general updates, and I'm gonna switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. So first is I'm gonna talk a little bit about Russia. So the Russian president gave a speech where he said that Russia basically mobilized 305,000 people, and they also had 80,000 volunteers. So roughly 385,000 soldiers are going to be joining Russian military. This means that they are not, I would say, they are real soldiers. So basically, it's not just administrative personnel, which is, for example, in Russian army, out of roughly slightly more than 2 million people in general Russian army, actually military is 1.1 million. The rest is sort of administrative, call it fluff. So this is 385,000. If we look what's sort of how things have progressed since the beginning of the war. So Russia roughly used plus minus 200,000 invasion troops. Then they mobilized in September, October, and also November of 2022, roughly 300,000. And this is obviously Russian numbers. I rely to extent on what the Russian media states, and unfortunately, Russian general staff doesn't give reports to me. So going back to this, so it was 200 plus 300 plus this 385. Since the beginning of the war, Russia probably lost close to 300,000, plus minus, also very rough ballparking. And out of that number, probably about 150,000 dead, maybe slightly more, but at least 150,000 dead. And the rest is wounded and prisoners of war and so on. So basically, people, for various reasons, that they could not continue the war. So probably like 150 plus 150, so that's 300,000. So what Russia has right now on the front line is probably close to 600,000, maybe slightly less, maybe 550, 500,000 soldiers. So this is actually active soldiers, boots on the ground, that actually can be used in the war. There's no sort of administrative fluff here. Relative to Ukrainian army, Ukrainian army was about 800 to 900,000 people from the beginning. Many of these people sort of were not terribly usable because there was a lack of equipment and ammunition. But at this point, losses on the Ukrainian side, let's say, plus minus the same, and just for the sake of simplicity, I would say 300,000, same ideas, 150,000 dead at the minimum, but not hugely more, let's put this way. There are numbers that are talking about 300,000 dead, 400, just those are completely, I would say, propaganda numbers that try to basically exaggerate and shock viewers or readers, and basically like bait clicks type of stuff. And also about 150,000 wounded, plus minus. So basically, Ukrainian armies roughly at this point 600,000, roughly similar to the Russian army. Before this was not terribly advertised. Ukrainian army was actually nominal. Well, it was larger in terms of number of people. Unfortunately, many of those people were not really armed and equipped properly, so they could not be properly used in many ways. But now everything is sort of more balanced, and situation, as you can see, the the balance of power is clearly shifting in to Russian favor at this point. On the positive side, Ukrainian forces are much better equipped than they were at the beginning. I wouldn't say that this is a great equipment, but it's not as ragtag or just plain old Soviet equipment that in most cases was extremely poorly maintained. There are some items that Ukraine got from the West that are decent ones, special artillery pieces. I would say it's jewel in Ukrainian crown, and thanks to that, actually, a lot of Russian attacks have been sort of thwarted, and so that's something where Ukraine actually dominates at this point on the battlefield relative to Russian side, and that really helps to maintain the front line. And by that I mean not quantitatively. Quantity-wise, Ukraine has fewer artillery pieces. The quality-wise, that's where Ukraine dominates in terms of quality, and to some extent, because the quantitative advantage of Russia is not that huge, so quality allows to trump that quantitative advantage that Russia has. So that's a situation, and what this really means is that Russia may or may not try to do something larger than trying to capture Avdiyivka. We'll see if that happens. So far, Russia lost quite a bit of resources trying to capture Avdiyivka, but the losses are, I would say, not enough to completely preclude any major Russian offensive or attempt at offensive. So at this point, not yet, but it's definitely going in that direction. In addition, Russia is planning to create 7 new divisions, 19 new brigades, and 49 new regiments in 2024. So as you can see, there's no plan for, let's say, disarming, de-escalation, and so on. There is clearly a plan for militarization and continuing the conflict. These numbers translate into roughly ballparking 240 to 150,000 new soldiers on the ground. So if we add to 600, that's there, and that's another 250, so that's going to be 850. It's not decisive advantage, but it certainly will allow Russia for sure to do offensive operations on a large scale at that point. Again, timing is unclear, everything is unclear, but just purely looking at the numbers and the situation, it does look that Russia is preparing for, let's say, major offensive sometime in the summer of the next year. I mean, assuming everything goes in a straight line, which actually it never does. So in some ways, that's probably incorrect sort of assumption or forecast, because things will definitely change completely, but it's just unclear at this point how. And again, as I said, 1917 moment is looming for both Ukraine and Russia. At this point, it's a little bit, so it's definitely shifted towards Ukraine, but Russia is not going to be immune from that either. There's another interesting data from Russia. So 15% of people who fled Russia since September of 2022, when there was mobilization announced, so 15% of those returned. That's roughly 120,000 people. And slightly, so the number of people that left Russia was slightly more than 1 million. Another, so a little bit more economic or governmental mismanagement, bureaucratic mismanagement of Russian economy, or military mismanagement of the Russian economy. Example is Russia is going to be banning export of chicken meat because it went up roughly 30% in 2023, and chicken meat is it's basically low quality protein for poor people. Essentially, you're providing at least some kind of meat for poor people. And so that's important for the Russian political top and Russian president to maintain social stability in a time of war. So that's what they're doing. I'm gonna switch a little bit to China. So China actually had really a big win in the Latin America. It signed strategic agreement with Colombia, and first of all, Colombia is fairly a relatively okay managed country in Latin America. Sort of, not as good as Chile, but it's definitely much better than majority of countries in Latin America. I would say it's number 2 or 3 in Latin America. So that is very important, and that's obviously big loss, especially for the U.S. because U.S. had very strong influence on Colombia. It was essentially kind of like a bridgehead, U.S. bridgehead in Latin America, similar to Chile in many ways. Maybe not as successful as Chile, but in basically those were two main countries in Latin America that sort of U.S. sphere of influence, and apparently Colombia is clearly drifting in completely different direction in Latin America. The other important news out of China is that Li Keqiang, who is a former premier of Chinese government, who was pushed out in 2022. He suddenly died out of heart attack just recently, and this is so who he was from the opposing faction in Chinese sort of power system. So as I mentioned before, current Chinese president is coming from more sort of faction that wants to use military force to solve the problems and basically project Chinese military power over the world to gain more control of the resources that China needs. Versus Li Keqiang was representing different group that was essentially running China in 2000s, and for the most of and all of the teens. That was basically that was focused on sort of peaceful way of conquering the world through trade and through business. So they are in a thing the part of the maybe not even confusion but misunderstanding. They both focus on conquering the world. It's just a question how you want to arrive at the end point, through sort of trade, peace, economy, or through military force. And so he was representing this more peaceful trade expansion, and he was 68. He just lost power roughly 10 or 11 months ago, and I would say his death looks very unusual, and it does look like there is big power struggle and fight inside of China, where current Chinese president is removing any potential opposition to him, and which again means that more difficult times are coming. First of all, in China, economy-wise, and we can see it from this another Chinese developer that's just defaulted. And so he's preparing from that perspective. There could be, significant challenges to current Chinese president. And then also he's obviously preparing for the time of war where he want to make sure there is no opposition. And again, this looks extremely similar, like playbook from the Soviet Union in the 20s and then early 30s, where how Stalin came to power in the Soviet Union. He was also just sort of initially one of many, and then he slowly was consolidating bureaucratic power in the Politburo that was sort of not visible initially, and then removing his opponents. Then he sort of officially in late 20s came to the power in the Soviet Union. And then he sort of started removing all of his sort of opponents who he just removed from the formal position, but then he started removing them physically. And again, it was all done sort of someone kills himself or does this or poisons or just all kind of strange deaths started to appear until eventually they will also be called enemy of the people, and obviously then executed eventually. So again, this looks extremely similar to how what happened in the Soviet Union in the 20s and then early 30s. And again, this also highlights that China is going the same way, and if the Soviet Union was was preparing for World War II. So just for those who don't understand, the Soviet Union was preparing essentially from like 28 or 29 for next World War, and so looks very alarming. Let's put it this way. Now let's switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine, and I'm just going to do a quick walkthrough in a clockwise fashion, the way I do all the time. So the situation along the state border remains the same, no essential changes there. Situation on the North Lugansk front line also more or less the same, somewhat quieter. There is apparently signs that Russian military command is regrouping its forces, so there's sort of definitely reduced level of activity overall. So we'll see what that means in the coming weeks and months, but there is sort of feeling and appearance of reshuffling of the forces. So as you can see, not much happening, and even before then, as I said before, it's all sort of basically tactical attacks. So it's nothing major. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Things here remain more or less the same. There are some attacks, Russian, again, local tactical attacks north of Bakhmut, but there are no attacks south of Bakhmut. So essentially, it doesn't look like Russian forces have enough resources to basically counterattack tactically Ukrainian troops. So they're just trying to sort of different locations in the search of weakness, essentially. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Things here also reduced in terms of activity. There are still Russian attempts to squeeze Ukrainian troops out of Avdiyivka. They are definitely weaker in force and in size and in strength. So we'll see what's going to happen. I'm pretty sure that Russian command is not abandoning this idea. So this is again, as I said before, is going to turn into like typical World War I type of battle where Russian command starts this, then Ukrainian Ukrainian command is bringing more resources here, more forces, this is what is happening. So Ukrainian command brought more forces. Now Russian command needs to sort of, increase their number of forces to be able to continue this meat grinder, and this is looks like this is going to be the sort of ongoing power struggle until something breaks or Russian side exhausts itself and stops doing that. So this is where it's all going. The outcome remains to be seen. Ukrainian forces should be able to sort of hold on to the position, but we'll see in the long run. You never know. And then, typical Russian attacks against Marinka without any success so far. This is just the same picture what I shown before. Russian troops haven't made any progress since then. Now let's look at Zaporizhya front line. Things here are fairly quiet. I would say very quiet. There are some very minor tactical attacks by Russian troops north of Priyutne, and then also Ukrainian attack attempts, again also tactical, towards Kopany, also very unsuccessful. And again, it seems like Ukrainian command doesn't really learn from the failures over the summer. I mean, there was was very clear this shouldn't be done the way it was done, but apparently, again, this is Soviet command and Russian command is actually not different. The same type of approach. Now let's look at the situation along the Dnipro River. Things here are more or less got quieter. So essentially, Ukrainian troops managed to keep the bridgeheads, even though they were reduced in size, become smaller, weaker, and so on. But they still able to hold on, create a bunch of new ones, and basically create potentially successful springboard to continue. Again, this is an example of how things shouldn't be done, because once you establish, you really want to exploit it. You want to, move forward from there and basically accumulate forces and breach, and basically turn into sort of operational, into large operation. And this is just, even from this is an example how that Ukrainian command does not sort of plan properly, and also probably some other limitation is Ukrainian troops are not trained and not organized to do large-scale operations like that. And with this small sort of tiny piece bites, it's not going to be ever possible to do anything large unless Russian troops gonna get exhausted, which from what I told you at the very beginning, it's not going to happen. So there won't be any repetition of how it happened in the fall of last year, where Ukrainian forces liberated the Kharkiv region and portion of the Kherson region. This sort of easy victories are over for Ukrainian side, and unless there is a qualitative change on the Ukrainian side, there won't be any victories actually going forward. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Until next time.